Hello everyone, we're here in the first International Identitarian Congress. We're here with Mr. Ernst Zundel. So we're glad to have you here, Ernst, and we'll like to ask you some questions.
Very good.
Ernst, the first thing I want to ask you, all your audience wants to know, is you can give further explanations about what actually is the Leuchter report.
I was on trial in Canada for false news. And it was a law from the 12th century, 1275, over 800 years old. They put me on trial because of my viewpoint on history. And since I did not believe what transpired inside German camps, they were saying that I was spreading false news and I could have gotten up to 5 years imprisonment. And this is a criminal charge. And since I was an immigrant to Canada, if I had been given 6 months, more than 6 months, yes, then I was automatically to be deported back to Germany. So this, this trial was very important for me because it meant my life, my career, everything would have ended if I had been convicted. And so the trial proceeded. I engaged an American prison director to talk about the gassing of people because he had a permit to kill people by gas chamber operator. And there's a protocol, they call that, of 32 or 34 points that the man who is in charge of an execution by gas had to follow. For instance, if there was a guard on the outside of the perimeter of the prison, they had to be called down, because the gas coming out of the gas chamber would have killed them. And there's a newspaper story from San Francisco. It's called The Dead Pigeons of San Quentin. And when they gassed people in San Quentin, invariably the pigeons were gassed and fell down from underground. So anyways, it's a very dangerous procedure. And the reason why I'm pointing this out is it is not like in Hollywood. You know, the way we see in Hollywood, the way these castings took place, totally at variance to what happens in reality.
Because there were like 100 people in a same room gassed and killed.
Actually, more than that.
More than that.
900, 1,000. Yeah, so it was, in a way, grotesque. And the Leuchter report came into being because for the court, I wanted to illustrate to the court in Canada what the reality of this was, what the scientific reality was. And so Fred Leuchter was building and designing gas chambers and electric chairs in the United States. That was his profession. Macabre, but it was his profession. And so Fred, this prison director Armentrout told me that his technician was Fred Leuchter, and why didn't I contact him? And so I took the name down, the address down, we contacted him. Eventually, he agreed to go to Poland and look at these actual facilities.
Like an undercover?
Yeah, well, in those days, there was a communist government in Poland.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And it was very dangerous. And of course, I couldn't go and write to the Polish government, we want to examine your gas chambers.
Of course.
So they would have stopped us at the border. And so they went underground. In separate planes, they went to Warsaw and then they reassembled and then they went to these camps. Now, the idea for doing that was to elevate this story that circulated about German guilt and German methods of extermination and so on. I wanted to elevate it out of the realm of words or photos or books. I wanted to have physical scientific evidence, and the Leuchter report is the first examination, the first forensic examination, the way a detective or a police department would do if there is one murder. Had never been done before.
So the first serious attempt to get the truth, right, was the Leuchter.
What's the Leuchter report? To get scientifically, not, you know, a writer in a book, he can distort the story. A witness can lie, and the lie is reported as truth. But I tried to elevate and to remove from what we say in English is he said, she said, they said. I wanted to remove it from that realm and bring it up to the level of a forensic examination by scientific methods, meaning examining, for instance, rock samples, bricks, the effluents of toilets and so on, examining all that in a laboratory, not in communist Poland, but so they had to smuggle this out into America and then examining a very famous laboratory in America. And the idea for an American laboratory was to be neutral, because I didn't want to have a German laboratory. So that basically was the idea, and they did that in secret. They took all these samples, they painted, measured, examined. Fred Leuchter was an expert in America in execution, and so we applied American standard to German facilities in Poland. And so I had lots of pictures in that report, and we had a draftsman, an architectural draftsman, and Fred and this draftsman measured every door, every window, the height of the rooms, the drains, and so on, just the way a detective would make when he was investigating a crime scene. So what you're looking at in the Leuchter report is the first forensic examination of these facilities by neutrals.
And what is the conclusion? What was the conclusion of this report?
So Fred came to Toronto. He submitted a report over 200 pages in about that size, thick report, with statistics, with his drawings, with his photographs that he himself took. And I was convicted. So he submitted it. The court didn't believe it, and I was convicted. But after 9.5 years of going through the courts in Canada, I won my case in the highest court of Canada, the Supreme Court of Canada, not under technicality. The Supreme Court did not rule saying, oh, that Fred Leuchter, boy, he's quite a smart fellow, and we let Zundel go because he's a smart fellow and he did this. No, they did what courts frequently do. They said, in Canada, a member of a minority. As a German, I was a member of a minority. As a revisionist who didn't believe in the Orthodox history, I was a minority. The majority believed it. Ernst was a minority by not believing it. And so the Supreme Court ruled in a very, very long judgment. It was 140 pages. And it said, a member of Canadian society is protected to tell all the things that he wants to tell without looking over his shoulders constantly for censors. So Ernst Zundel is a German, a member of a minority intellectually, and he must be free to tell his history the way he sees it, because the Canadian Constitution protects this right. It protects the right to be wrong. And so the Supreme Court said, the message, the content of what I said, or what the individual says in other cases, is immaterial. They did not judge me on the material. They judged me on the principle that I must have the right to tell the truth.
But the Leuchter exam has nothing to do with your liberation there, right?
Well, not really.
They ignore it.
No, they mentioned it in passing, but the reason for me being freed after 9.5 years was philosophical, in that they said a minority must not have to fear censorship and persecution. A minority must be able to tell its own version of history. So the Leuchter report was peripheral to the case, but I was freed on the principle.
I see. And what is the participation of David Irving in all this case?
David Irving was writing a book. He was in Key West, Florida, and David Irving and I had said that he had told me if I ran into trouble, he was going to help me in court as an expert witness. And so when I sent Leuchter to Poland, I never told anybody. Never even told the rest of my staff.
Just in case.
Tell my friends. Well, because I didn't want Polish communist guards waiting at the border. And so I waited till Fred Leuchter was back in America, and I'm going to come to the story of the drama of this, how Leuchter got into Poland and out of Poland. But anyways, when he was back in America, he called me and he said, we have the report, we have all the samples, they have submitted them to the laboratory, and the results are very good for the Germans. And so David Irving said, I am coming. So he kept his promise that he would come to testify. But I got ahead of myself because here they are in Poland. And there's communist soldiers, policemen, guards at the airport, everywhere. And also, and of course, in the towns. And they had rented cars. And they were going through 3 different concentration camps. And taking these measurements, taking the photographs, taking the samples, which they were then going to take back to the United States. And during the time that they were there, the boy, the son of Mrs. Leuchter, who went along on that trip, was killed in an American Air Force base.
Leuchter's son?
Of Mrs. Leuchter's son. Yeah. And so the American Army called me in Toronto and said, Mr. Zundel, there has been a tragic accident. Mrs. Leuchter's son has been killed, and we need to notify her. And I guessed if they notified Mrs. Leuchter, she'll pack everything up and come back to the United States. That's what I thought. And so I decided to stall, to say to, and I consulted my lawyer, what do you think, Doug Christie? Well, do I tell the lady? Do I not tell the lady? My chief witnesses, Dr. Forrest's own advisors, they all said, you have to tell her. And you can't, the kid is dead, you have to tell, it's your duty, your moral duty. And I slept overnight, prayed on it, and then I said the next morning, well, I am not going to tell her. Because before history, this is a one-time chance that we get at the substance of what is going on there. And so I didn't tell her. The bereavement officer called me from the United States Army. This accident had happened. I didn't give a straight answer. So what does he do? He calls Fred Leuchter's 80-year-old mother. And I had told Fred not to tell anybody, but he told his 83-year-old mother. And so she talks to the American officer, tells him, yeah, my son is in Auschwitz, my son is in Kelno, and he's looking at these gas chambers there, and all the secret that I had wanted to keep so carefully. The old Oma, the old lady of 83, tells this American officer. And so the reason why that man never called me back is he had gotten the information. And so I was thinking everything is hunky-dory over there in Poland, not realizing that this American officer contacted the State Department in Washington. The State Department contacted the Polish embassy in Washington. Polish embassy in Washington contacted the government in Warsaw. The government in Warsaw contacted Polish state radio, and they broadcast this information that I wanted to keep so carefully, broadcasted all over the radio in Poland. And Fred Leuchter, his wife, and my friends were hammering away, chiseling away for the samples from the walls and the drains from these alleged gas chambers. 2 officers of the Polish security forces looking like SS men. They had the same uniforms, the same caps, black, long, tall boots, and it was in February. And so my team saw these, what looked like SS men, coming across the concentration camp and coming towards the gas chamber. And they thought, oh, now they had found us out. Our hammering was recognized, and they're going to arrest us now. And so they hid their things quickly in their bags, and the Polish officers didn't care about the bag. So they only said there has been a tragic accident in America, and the Polish government is asking us to escort you to Warsaw to the airport. Now, we had great difficulty in figuring out how to get these samples out of Poland, because out of Poland was like going out of Israel. They always inspected your luggage going out. In America, they do it coming in those days. And so here we were stuck 134 samples, bags full of bricks and cement pieces and dirt and so on. These were that they were going to take to the laboratory in America.
How many bags? 2, 3?
130.
130 bags.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this was luggage, and of course he had taken along a hammer, chisels, flashlights, because he had to go into underground facilities and so on. And we really didn't know how they were going to get out. And I had supplied them with silk stockings, calculators, and all kinds of chewing gum, tobacco, lipstick that they could use to bribe,
the officers,
prison guards or Polish police or something. We didn't need anything. Here's what happened. Mrs. Leuchter, in that facility, said to these 2 policemen after speaking with Fred, "He's my son. He's dead already. He's in a refrigerator in the airbase in Oklahoma. Whether I come home a week earlier or a day later, it makes no difference." So she said to Fred, "This is an important mission. Maybe nobody can ever come back here again. And so I, the mother of this dead boy, decide we will stay, we will finish the mission." And so she, with a translator, we had a translator along, said to these 2 policemen, "The mother has decided we are not coming with you now, but if you come tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock to the hotel, then we'll come with you." 11 o'clock in the morning, the 2 cops, motorcycle cops came, and a whole column of police cars. Red lights flashing, blue lights flashing, sirens wailing. They drove all the way from the middle of Poland, clear through Poland, with all this stuff in those bags, and they ended up at Warsaw Airport. Our problem was the control at Warsaw Airport, and because so many policemen with blue lights and everything came, I don't know what the order was to them.
They didn't check it.
They stood all there, dozens of policemen saluting as Fred and his samples walked towards the counter. They never checked his luggage at the counter.
Not even one?
Not even once. They just cursorily looked at the passport, all saluted, all these policemen, military people, all the way up the steps of the Polish airline that flew them out of Poland to New York. So all our worries were for nothing. But it was like miraculous.
It was a miracle, yeah. Providence.
Absolutely. And now, the story ends in this way. I introduce it in Canada to the court. Fred introduces his report. He's interviewed for 2 days, interrogated by the judge and by the prosecutor. And the Toronto police then confiscated the samples. And they're still in police custody. As you and I speak here in Mexico, 30 years later, they're still in custody at the Toronto Police Forensic chamber. So
they never released that evidence?
No, because they said to me, "Zundel, this was stolen. This was stolen goods. We cannot release it to you."
A piece of brick is a stolen good.
But no, can you imagine? So that's the story of the Leuchter report.
Wow, it's unbelievable.
And they were hardly, of course, introduced in court. That friends who were witnesses there and myself, we had translated all these things. And within months, the Leuchter report was out in 7, 8 languages worldwide.
So it spread all over the world.
Today, I mean, there is not a website that talks about history and the forbidden history where the Leuchter report has to figure.
And you can actually read it online, right? It's available online.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and did you have? I heard you have a lot of problems because you wanted to tell the truth, right, about some facts.
Well, I would have to say, I was charged for a booklet for false news of 30,000 words, 30 pages. And that booklet was called "Did 6 Million Really Die?"
Yes.
And it was translated, when I first received it, was already in some 15 languages. And since then, it's in dozens and dozens of languages already. But that booklet became the kind of publication of destiny in my life, because it meant I had to constantly focus on World War II. And I'm an artist by profession, and I would not ever have concentrated my mind for so long on one macabre topic, because whatever wrong was done, or how many people got killed, in whichever way, I could not bring one person alive, German, Polish, Jewish. So I always say this is a macabre issue.
Yes, it is.
And I wanted to put an end to the macabre issue. I wanted to actually end it by having a forensic examination. Let the truth come out what the truth was. For me, fortunately, the truth was favorable. But I would have lived with, I wouldn't have disputed the science. I wanted to have a scientific proof. I didn't want to have a propaganda proof by some writer or some lying witnesses.
Wow. And I hear you have a lot of people trying to kill you, burning your house, protests outside your house, very violent reaction, right? Can you tell us about it?
Well,
I have seen some pictures of protesters.
Yeah. I will show you at the end of the thing.
Okay.
I'll show you some pictures. The prosecution goes this way for political cases. They first ignore you, and then they ridicule you, and then they persecute you. And if you don't give in after all those, then they prosecute you. And mostly you end in jail. So all these things were tried for me, and I withstood the bombs, the fires, the beatings, the demonstrations, because I was convinced that I had a mission to do what I was doing. I wanted to end the speculation and the hatred, and I wanted to be the person to do it because I had enough confidence in myself, and I had talents. I could speak, I could broadcast, I could make drawings, I could mobilize people for demonstrations, and in a way, all in one package. And because I didn't drink alcohol and didn't take dope and was a very serious and sober person, it helped me steer this issue to the end, to this thing. And so the fires were terror. I cannot say anything else, but this was terror. And it was not nice, it was dangerous. And they destroyed 6,000 books in my library, 30 years of research into these issues, 60 or 70 unpublished manuscripts for books that I wanted to wait till I had won my case. And of course, destroyed. One copier alone was $29,000, was a Canon copier, and I had 6 or 7 copiers in my house. So the damage came into, the police estimated $480,000.
Wow. You're a real victim of intolerance, right?
Well,
and you're a very brave man, you and your wife too, it seems.
Yeah. Okay.
And let me ask you, what is your relation with, or what was, or still is your relation with David Irving in this whole story?
David Irving came to the court when Leuchter came back from Poland. And David Irving had been, like all of us were, we all believed in the Holocaust. I mean, not one of my witnesses, including myself, we all believed it. Because we had seen it on the TV and seen it in books and
movies and stuff.
Movies and the works. And so David Irving had written, he was the author of over 40 books on history. And in one particular book, he had written that 77 Nazis, leading Nazis, had their hands in the Holocaust. And during the trial, during the proceedings, the prosecutor always brought out this fact that David Irving doesn't question it, always saying, so why do you question it? Here's this famous historian that's written so many books. He says 77 German government officials believed in it. Why do you not believe in it? So this was his trump card. But he had not known that I had sent this team to Auschwitz, and that when David Irving saw the results, he changed his mind. And so he then testified in court, prosecutor saying, but you said in this book that they knew, and they did this and they did that. And so David Irving said, I am human, like everybody else. I saw the films, I read the books, I saw the newspaper articles, I heard the witnesses speak, and so I believed He said, but believing and knowing are two different things.
Wow, what an honest man, right? That's not that common.
I mean, and you know, he repudiated his own book, Hand on the Bible, in the courtroom in Toronto, and knew that he was going to desperately damage his career.
Because actually, I mean, at that time, he was already a well-known author all over the world, right? Like bestseller.
Absolutely, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And he said to me on that day, Zundel, my agent in New York is negotiating with the Jewish publishing house for the reprinting or the publishing of one of my books, and this could potentially bring me $1,500,000. If this agent finds out that I'm testifying in Toronto the way I am testifying in Toronto, I could well lose that contract.
And he actually did, right?
Yeah, so for us, it's easy to state something, but for him, over $1 million was riding on it. So that's double courage.
That's right. He was really tested, right?
Yeah.
Well, did you become?
And he was persecuted, as you know. Poor David Irving
in Austria, right?
He was not jailed in Austria, cancelled from Australia, barred from Canada, barred from the United States for 10 years or something. He suffered terribly because of his role.
Well, you two are real heroes, right? Because a lot of people write a lot of good books, but I mean, you actually have suffered a lot of consequences, and you still think the same, right? I mean, you haven't changed your thoughts. So I think that makes that an example for all the people and the young men around the world.
You see, I cannot publicly state into these cameras here what I think now. My thoughts are my own. And David Irving also has paid the consequences, and he's no longer, I say nothing. He says something in order to be able to sell books. But the price for both of us, well, terrible.
Wow. Well, Mr. Zundel, is there anything else you want to say?
I'm going to share with you some photos that you can add to the film. And what I want to say to your audience is, principles are important. They're not just words. And honor is important. Not just my honor, but the honor of a people. And I did that not for my honor. It brought me nothing but persecution, problems, bombs, fires, but for the German people, especially the dead Germans that could no longer defend themselves. I became their spokesman. I became their protector. And I think it is important in the march of generations that one generation protects the other generation, and the German World War II soldiers' generation protected the land of Germany where I was growing up so that I have a chance to grow up. So I owe these soldiers, men and women who were in the German armed forces, I owed them this debt. It was a debt of honor. And I'm very proud that I was able to clear their name by sending Leuchte-Reporter.
Thank you so much. And Zundel, last question, if I can. Do you have any advice for these new generations that maybe, I don't know if you agree, but a lot of people is maybe awakening, right, from this whole propaganda? I don't know, would you agree with that? Maybe people is getting more aware of this propaganda, or?
Absolutely. The internet is ultimately our great savior. And when my wife and I started the Zundel site, it was the democratization of information through the internet, because suddenly on a small screen, IBM, CBS, CNN, their screen was no bigger than my screen. That's right. And so that was the democratization, and it ended up in every living room, at every university student the world over. My wife gets all kinds of letters from all around the world about texts that are on the internet.
So whoever wants to know the truth, they can find the truth if they have the will.
They can certainly inform themselves about the facts, and then can decide, you know, what they feel the truth is. I must be careful by what I say, not that I talk myself into another prison term.
No, of course, we don't want that.
And so, and on my wife's Zundel site, there is information in 10 languages. And there's over 4,000 documents. And one document that is on there alone is a book by my English-speaking Canadian attorney, Barbara Kulaska, that is 375,000 words. One document. So, 4,000 documents. There's a lot of information on there. In 10 languages.
Yeah, unbelievable. And you have some pictures in here, right?
Yep, I will show you the wind is blowing, so we couldn't show them in, but I can discuss it with them.
But yes.
See, this is how my garage in my house looked after the first bomb went off. And it damaged my car, my big American car.
When was this?
It was in Toronto, Canada.
1981?
It was 1984.
84. That was the first attempt against your life.
With bombs.
With bombs, yeah.
And this here is a demonstration of my enemies. You can see here the Jewish star.
Ah, okay. So, okay. Here's the first...
This is the first bomb explosion.
First bomb. This is a protest.
These are protests outside my house.
How many people were there?
Up to 5,000.
5,000 people insulting.
They started sometimes 1,000, 2,000, but 5,000 people was the greatest number. And so the Toronto police very kindly dispatched special police force, and they were units of 100, and so they would dispatch 100 or 200 policemen. This unit with the white helmets always carried fire extinguishers because they had thrown Molotov cocktails against my house. So this is a special unit of the Toronto police, and these demonstrators that you saw in the other photographs. And then I wanted to protect my building, and I had put this big, strong fence around, and the Toronto city officials made me cut it in half because it was not permitted to have a 2-meter tall fence in Toronto. And when my house was burned by an arsonist, it was very easy for him to climb across the fence because it had been cut to half.
So these were not peaceful demonstrators, right?
No. They shouted, "We want Zundel, we want Zundel, how do we want Zundel?" And then they all in unison said, "We want Zundel dead."
Dead.
So they were not peaceful.
Wow.
Yeah. And now, this is about the struggle. This one here, these photos we can use for something else.
Okay, then we can edit that. And there is a front, I mean, you were in the front page of a lot of important papers.
Yeah, there were a lot of newspapers coverage about my trial. Here. You can just fold them open like that, and then we can scan them later.
This is the front page. No, this is not the front.
No, this is one of the pages.
One of the pages, a long article.
This is me, it is my cameraman and bodyguard.
What paper is this? The name of the paper? Is the Toronto...
This is, let me just see here. That's the Globe and Mail.
Globe and Mail.
Yeah, this is like a business newspaper.
Wow, this is the first one.
So this is the bottom part of the newspaper, and this is the top part of the newspaper.
Can people find these on the internet? Or they have to go to the archive. So it's available on the internet.
Well, as long as you go on. See, this is the Globe and Mail. That's March. Yeah, March
1985.
1985.
Prosecution Zundel trial faced long odds.
And why this is important is the first time in history that this photograph was published. It is of a swimming pool inside the concentration camp of Auschwitz. Because if you look here this way, you see, this is inside. That indicates that it's inside. It was a large Olympic-sized swimming pool.
Inside Auschwitz.
Inside the concentration.
And I heard as well that there were some music bands in there too, right?
Music bands, yeah, sculpture classes. And now this is the Toronto Star front page.
Okay, we show it. Front page of Toronto Star.
The circulation of that newspaper is 700,000.
Wow.
It's the largest newspaper in Canada.
March 1st, 1985.
Yeah, March 1st, 85. And you can see this was after I was convicted. So I presented all my evidence, but I was always convicted till the Supreme Court decided to set me free.
Well,
Yeah, and
certainly you have a lot of attention in those days.
yeah.
This one is where Holocaust survivor is accused of lying.
I mean, this is a main newspaper. Main newspaper in Canada.
Wow. Just passing. And I guess we have a lot of...
You can see I was a handsome-looking fellow with hair.
Okay, for the audience, they want to see you, and you were
In my glory, yes.
in your glory. Ernst Zundel. Wow.
And then there's this one here that shows me with a helmet.
The helmet. Doesn't say the date, but you can find... Ah, yes, it's the Toronto Star, February 5, 85.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Have a lot of...
And this is interesting for maybe zooming in. The man on the right
Yes.
is the judge.
The judge.
In
Let
my
me show
first
the...
case, yeah.
So this man on the right is the judge.
No, this one here.
This one here, the prosecutor.
Yeah, and this is Alan Sheffman. He's from the B'nai B'rith Lodge. But this judge convicted me and did so many errors in law that the appeal court in Ontario gave me either a new trial or they were to drop the charges. So I got a new trial because he made over 100 errors in law, Judge Locke.
Judge Locker.
And this is me leaving the court after I was found guilty. And you can see
That's you in the middle here.
the reason for the helmet is because these people constantly hit me over the head with sticks. And so I needed to protect my head. And this is the picture of my lawyer.
Very school Maverick. Wow. That's your book there, right? A copy of your book? No.
No,
I don't know.
This is a book about, on my trial.
On your trial.
From a Jewish organization. Yeah, and we'll leave it at that.
Wow. Okay.
Good.
Well, Mr. Ernst, thank you so much for having us. Okay. And well, let's hope this Congress ends the best way. So thank you so
It's
much.
actually a very, very interesting Congress.
What's your impression on the Congress so far?
I have never been to such an intensive Congress. I mean, my wife and I, we were utterly exhausted when we came home last night. It's like overload
Yes.
of information. And boy, we sank into bed last night, but rich with new information. There's unbelievable quality of people here at that Congress, and I'm very glad that I was invited to it.
And you have a lot of fun, certainly, in here, right?
Oh, did you see that?
All the time. You don't have a time by yourself. So.
Yeah. Very good.
So, well, Ernst,
Okay.
thanks again.
Okay.
Thank you so much for having us.
All right.
Okay.